Welcome back. In this video, I want to show you the performance of the asset allocation ETFs and how I'm going to use them to benchmark my portfolio in 2025. I do believe it's really important to benchmark your portfolio. I do it on an annual basis to make sure I'm on the right track. Your portfolio may return, say, 10% in a given year, and you might think you're doing really well for that year, but then the benchmark that you're following might return 15%, and you've actually lagged the benchmark. Now, I do invest mostly in index ETFs, so I know I'm going to be fairly close to the benchmark, but I still think it's important. And for those of you that are investing with someone else or investing in mutual funds or investing in individual stocks or anything like that, I think it's really important to see how your performance compared to an asset allocation ETF. I use these to benchmark my portfolio because it's the absolute easiest way to invest and it's really cheap and easy, and so if I can't beat that performance, then maybe I should just adjust my strategy and go with an asset allocation ETF. Here is how I track my asset allocation. I try to stay with a 25-50-25 portfolio or around that, plus or minus some percentages, and I use this spreadsheet here. When I have more money to invest, I can just enter it into this green box here and it tells me where I should allocate that money. And you can see the percentages are fairly close. Canada's almost perfect. The US has lagged in the last year, and so it's down a little bit. The international ETFs are fairly good. And I do have a little bit of emerging markets. I haven't invested in emerging markets in quite some time. And I have some other there, 2.84% of my portfolio. Years ago, I used to do a core and explore type of portfolio where 10% of my portfolio was sort of gambling with individual stocks and stuff like that. And I haven't done that in a long time. I've sold off most of my individual stocks. I'm only hanging on to 4 stocks, and I have a little bit of cryptocurrency in there as well. It's now less than 3% of my portfolio. And this allocation is pretty funny because at the beginning of the year, it was very different as the US equity portion of my portfolio was a little too high, and then the US has underperformed the other 2 markets in 2025, and I'll show you that here. So I do love this ETF comparison tool on BMO's website, and I've just put in XIC because that's what I use for most of my Canadian equity portion, XUS for my US, XEF for my international exposure, and then the small amount of emerging market I have in VEE. And what I don't have is VTI. VTI is a US listed ETF, and this comparison tool does not allow for the comparison of US ETFs. So I'm just going to use XUS for the bulk of that. And if you scroll down here to the 1-year comparison, you can see that Canada has outperformed the other equity markets, 31.6%. So Canada did really well over that time. XUS, the US portion, 12.1%. And you can see that's the bottom line there. It really didn't recover as well from Liberation Day as the other markets. XEF returned 25.4%, and VEE, the emerging markets, returned about 19.2%. So all in all, it was a fantastic year, again, to invest. So when you put that all together into an asset allocation ETF, here are the 100-0, the all equity portfolios, the ones that end in EQT, EQT standing for equity. And so there's your Vanguard, your iShares, BMO, TD, and your Global X all equity portfolios. And if you scroll down to the 1-year performance here, you can see they're all fairly similar. VEQT and XEQT returning about 20.5%, ZEQT at about 20%, and TEQT is brand new. It came out in 2025, so there's no data out there yet for it, or you're not allowed to put out data for it yet, and HEQT at about 20%. So why is there that slight discrepancy between VEQT, XEQT, and ZEQT? It comes down to the geographical allocation for each portfolio. You can see that VEQT has 43% in the US and 30% in Canada, and XEQT has 41% in the US and 27% in Canada, whereas ZEQT has a much higher allocation to the US at 48%. So almost 50% of the portfolio is in US, and with the US markets lagging the other markets, ZEQT did return slightly lower rates than the other 2. If you wanted some bonds in your portfolio and you went with an 80-20 portfolio, your GROs, your VGRO, XGRO, ZGRO, TGRO, and HGRO, And you can see here that the growth portfolio, or the 80-20 portfolios, returned about 17%. VGRO, XGRO, TGRO, HGRO, ZGRO, they all returned about 17%. TGRO is a little higher, you'll notice that yellow bar at the top. It is a little higher than the others. It actually has a higher allocation to equities than the others. It used to be a 90-10 portfolio. It's since gone down to about an 85-15 portfolio. So I don't know if their intention, now that they have TEQT, is to go down to that 80-20 portfolio like the other grows. But that's why that portfolio is a little higher than the others. And if you wanted to go a little more conservative, your balanced portfolio, VBAL, XBAL, ZBAL, TBAL, and HBAL, you can see that their returns are about 3% lower than the growth portfolios, at about 13%, VBAL and XBAL at 13.3%, ZBAL at 13%, TBAL at 13.8%, and HBAL at 12.9%. And if we were to compare the all equity to the growth to the balanced portfolios, I'm just going to use XEQT, ZGRO, and ZBAL. You can see equity markets did have a wonderful year again. 19.9% compared to 16.4% for that 80-20 portfolio, and a 13.0% for a 60-40 portfolio. And for me, I like to use XEQT because it's almost 50% US markets, and so because I have that 25-50-25 allocation, Canada, US, international, it's the closest portfolio that I have that I can use to compare my portfolio to, and it's often the one that I use to benchmark. And I returned a 19.77% in 2025, so really close to what XEQT returned. Some of that can be attributed to my higher allocation to the US markets. The US did underperform the others, and so that's one reason mine is going to be a little lower. The other reason is because of the sort of dollar cost averaging that I do every month when I get paid. I put some money into the market, and you can see after, say, June, as I'm putting more money in every month, it is at a higher price than it was in January. And this portfolio just shows the growth from January 1st of 2025. So I hope this video has shown you the performances of the asset allocation ETFs in 2025. It was another fantastic year for investing. I hope you also realize the importance of benchmarking your portfolio. I do it every year, and I recommend my students do it as well, although I do recommend that they just purchase an asset allocation ETF and set it and forget it. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to stay informed of some of my other ones, please like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.